Imagine being ripped away from your home, your family, and everything you know, and thrust into a world where your very freedom is denied. This was the reality for Gaspar Yanga, born in 1545 in the lush lands of Gabon, West Africa. A man of royal lineage, Yanga's early life was one of privilege, culture, and tradition. But all that changed when he was captured by slave traders, forced across the Atlantic, and sold into the harsh world of colonial Mexico. He was given the name Gaspar Yanga, though his spirit remained unbroken, a spark of resilience that would eventually ignite a revolution. Yanga found himself laboring under grueling conditions on sugarcane plantations in Veracruz. The work was relentless, the punishments severe, and the hope of freedom seemingly distant. Yet, even in the face of such oppression, he refused to surrender his will. What makes Yanga's story remarkable is not just his survival, but his audacity to envision a life free from bondage not just for himself, but for all those around him. He saw that freedom was not merely a dream. It was a goal worth risking everything to achieve. In a time when enslaved people were systematically stripped of their identity and autonomy, Yanga's courage set him apart. He began to organize, to connect with others who shared his vision. Together, they planned a daring escape, navigating treacherous mountains and forests, evading Spanish patrols that sought to suppress any hint of rebellion. Their journey was not just physical, it was a bold assertion of human dignity, a refusal to accept a life dictated by cruelty and subjugation. But Yanga's story is more than a tale of flight from oppression. It is a story of leadership, strategy, and community building. Once free, he and his followers established a settlement known as San Lorenzo de los Negros, a sanctuary where formerly enslaved individuals could live with autonomy, cultivate the land, and organize their society according to principles of justice and self-determination. Yanga became both a spiritual and military leader, guiding his people with wisdom, courage, and unwavering determination. This is the kind of history that challenges what we think we know about the past. It reminds us that the fight for freedom and human rights has been long, complex, and often led by those whose names are rarely taught in classrooms. Gaspar Yanga's legacy is a testament to resilience, vision, and the enduring human spirit. If you are fascinated by stories of courage, leadership, and hidden chapters of history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss our next journey into the untold stories that shaped the world. Trust me, you will want to see the incredible path Gaspar Yanga carved through history, and how his actions continue to inspire freedom and justice even today. The story of Gaspar Yanga is not only one of survival but also a remarkable tale of courage, ingenuity, and relentless pursuit of freedom, a story that echoes far beyond the mountains and rivers of colonial Mexico. After his escape from the brutal conditions of the sugarcane plantations in Veracruz, Yanga did not simply flee to hide. He envisioned a life where freedom was not just a fleeting moment but a sustainable reality for himself and those who had suffered alongside him. His leadership emerged naturally, not through titles or formal authority, but through the respect he commanded from those who recognized his wisdom, his courage, and his unwavering commitment to justice. It was this combination of strategic insight and moral authority that allowed him to unite a disparate group of escapees into a cohesive force capable of challenging the powerful colonial system that sought to suppress them. Yanga and his followers navigated the rugged terrain near Curuba, taking refuge in mountainous regions that provided natural defense against Spanish patrols. These lands, difficult for outsiders to traverse, became the foundation of what would evolve into San Lorenzo de los Negros, one of the first recognized free black settlements in the Americas. The settlement was more than a haven. It was a community meticulously organized under Yanga's guidance, blending practical governance with the communal bonds necessary for survival and growth. Under his direction, agricultural practices flourished, security measures were implemented, and cultural and spiritual life thrived, all while maintaining vigilance against threats from colonial authorities who viewed such independence as a direct challenge to their power. The Spanish authorities, initially dismissive of the rumors surrounding the escaped slaves, quickly recognized that Yanga's community represented a unique and growing threat. The Maroons, as Yanga's band was known, were not only survivors but also formidable strategists, capable of defending their territory with skill and tenacity. Yanga understood the delicate balance between confrontation and negotiation. He leveraged the knowledge of the local terrain, the loyalty of his people, and careful intelligence gathering to avoid the pitfalls of direct conflict whenever possible. Yet he did not shy away from demonstrating force when necessary to protect his community and assert their right to exist freely. Over decades, the reputation of Yanga's leadership grew, and so did the settlement. By 1600, the community had expanded to include over 500 men and women, creating a structured society that functioned independently of Spanish oversight. The growth of San Lorenzo de los Negros was not merely physical. It symbolized the potential for a society built on principles of equality, shared responsibility, and collective freedom, directly contradicting the oppressive social hierarchy imposed by colonial rule. Yanga's vision extended beyond survival. He sought to establish a legacy that would ensure the continuity of freedom for generations to come. Negotiations with the Spanish authorities became inevitable as attempts to suppress the community through military means repeatedly failed. Yanga's approach to diplomacy was as strategic as his approach to defense. Rather than simply resisting the colonial forces through violence, he used their own expectations against them, demonstrating that the Maroons were organized, disciplined, and capable of defending their settlement while remaining open to negotiation. He sent clear terms for peace, insisting on recognition of the settlement's autonomy, freedom for its residents, and respect for the governance established by Yanga and his descendants. These negotiations were prolonged and arduous, reflecting the high stakes of asserting freedom in a world dominated by colonial powers. The eventual recognition of San Lorenzo de los Negros in 1618 was a triumph not only for Yanga but for all who had believed in the possibility of self-determination despite the systemic forces arrayed against them. This acknowledgement by Spanish authorities marked one of the earliest instances in the Americas where a community of formerly enslaved people secured legal and social legitimacy, creating a precedent for other settlements and uprisings in the region. Yanga's ability to combine military acumen, strategic negotiation, and visionary leadership transformed what began as an escape into a lasting institution that embodied resilience, intelligence, and unyielding commitment to liberty. San Lorenzo de los Negros stands as a powerful testament to Yanga's enduring influence. His story challenges conventional narratives of colonial history that often emphasize the power of European conquerors while minimizing the agency and achievements of African individuals and communities. Through Yanga's leadership, we see the capacity of human beings to organize, strategize, and thrive even in the most hostile circumstances. And we are reminded that freedom is both a personal and collective endeavor that demands courage, foresight, and unrelenting resolve. The legacy of Yanga and his settlement continues to inspire, a vivid illustration that even in times of profound oppression, determination, and vision can carve a path toward justice and autonomy, leaving a mark on history that resonates across centuries. Gaspar Yanga's remarkable story of leadership and resilience reaches far beyond the mere act of escaping slavery. It is a narrative of vision, courage, and the creation of a society that embodied the ideals of freedom and self-determination in an era when such concepts were systematically denied to people of African descent. After the initial flight from the oppressive plantations of Veracruz, Yanga quickly realized that survival alone was insufficient. Freedom without structure, security, and purpose could easily unravel in the face of relentless external threats. Drawing upon both his innate intelligence and the experience gained under the harsh conditions of enslavement, Yanga assumed the dual role of spiritual and military leader. Understanding that his people required not only protection from physical attacks, but also a moral and cultural framework that would sustain them through the uncertainties of life on the run. Yanga's leadership was defined by an extraordinary blend of strategic thinking, empathy, and foresight. He understood that the safety of his community depended as much on careful planning and knowledge of the terrain as it did on the loyalty and morale of those under his guidance. The settlement he established, which would become known as San Lorenzo de los Negros, was carefully organized to meet both the practical and social needs of its inhabitants. Agricultural development was central to the community's sustainability, and under Yanga's direction, the land was cultivated with remarkable efficiency, ensuring a steady supply of food and resources. These agricultural efforts were not only a matter of survival, they represented a conscious effort to create a stable, thriving society in which people could live free from the daily fear of hunger or displacement. But Yanga's genius extended beyond farming and logistics. He cultivated a sense of shared purpose and identity among the Maroons, emphasizing the importance of unity, discipline, and mutual support. Spiritual guidance played a key role in this endeavor. In a time when religion was often wielded as a tool of control by colonial powers, Yanga helped his people retain a sense of dignity, moral grounding, and collective cohesion. Ceremonies, rituals, and communal gatherings reinforced social bonds and nurtured a shared sense of belonging that strengthened the community's resilience against external threats. By intertwining practical leadership with spiritual care, Yanga ensured that his people were equipped not only to survive but to flourish in an environment that was hostile to their very existence. Military strategy was another pillar of Yanga's leadership. The Maroons faced repeated attempts by Spanish forces to dismantle their settlement and reassert control. Yet Yanga's deep understanding of the local geography allowed them to anticipate, evade, and counter these incursions effectively. Natural fortifications, hidden pathways, and clever defensive tactics transformed the rugged landscape into a formidable ally. Yanga's forces, though numerically smaller and often less equipped than the colonial militias, used agility, terrain advantage, and intimate knowledge of the land to repel attacks, turning what might have seemed vulnerability into a source of strength. Every confrontation reinforced the community's cohesion and demonstrated the strategic brilliance that had become the hallmark of Yanga's leadership. Under Yanga's guidance, the settlement thrived for decades, a testament to the enduring power of visionary leadership. The Maroons were able to cultivate not only crops but also culture, governance, and social organization, creating a society in which formerly enslaved individuals could live with dignity, autonomy, and hope for the future. Children were raised with an understanding of freedom's value, elders were respected for their wisdom, and every member contributed to the survival and growth of the community. This multi-generational continuity, nurtured by Yanga's foresight, transformed San Lorenzo de los Negros into more than a safe haven. It became a living symbol of resistance, ingenuity, and the human capacity to construct thriving societies even in the shadow of oppression. Yet Yanga's impact was not limited to the internal strength of the community. It extended outward, challenging the assumptions and authority of colonial powers. Spanish forces repeatedly attempted to suppress the settlement through military campaigns. Yet each assault revealed not only the futility of such efforts, but also the effectiveness of Yanga's leadership. Through every skirmish, negotiation, and strategic maneuver, Yanga demonstrated that freedom was not granted, it was seized, protected, and sustained through courage, intelligence, and the collective will of a determined people. His ability to combine diplomacy with defense, vision with practical action, and spiritual guidance with military strategy ensured that San Lorenzo de los Negros would survive where countless other communities of escapees had been dismantled. In the broader context of history, Yanga's achievements resonate as a profound example of how leadership rooted in moral integrity, strategic insight, and unwavering commitment to human dignity can transform adversity into opportunity. His life challenges conventional narratives that often portray enslaved individuals merely as victims, instead highlighting their agency, creativity, and ability to shape history. By establishing a self-sufficient, secure, and spiritually cohesive settlement, Yanga not only safeguarded the lives of hundreds of formerly enslaved people, but also laid the groundwork for a legacy of freedom and resistance that continues to inspire today. The story of Gaspar Yanga reminds us that leadership is not defined by title or wealth, but by the courage to envision a better world and the tenacity to make it real, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the years passed and the settlement of San Lorenzo de los Negros flourished under Gaspar Yanga's leadership, the growing strength and autonomy of his community inevitably drew the attention and apprehension of Spanish colonial authorities. The Maroons' success had become more than a localized phenomenon. It was a bold statement against the established order, a visible proof that enslaved and formerly enslaved Africans could organize, defend, and govern themselves effectively. This undeniable challenge to the colonial system forced Yanga to navigate a delicate balance between resistance and diplomacy. Realizing that the ultimate goal of lasting freedom required more than victories on the battlefield, it required formal recognition and legal legitimacy. Yanga's approach to the Spanish authorities was characterized by strategic intelligence, patience, and an acute understanding of human behavior. Rather than allowing repeated skirmishes to escalate into needless bloodshed or the possible annihilation of his people, he leveraged every encounter as an opportunity to assert the settlement's strength while simultaneously opening channels for negotiation. The Spanish had underestimated the Maroons, seeing them only as fugitives or rebels. But Yanga's carefully orchestrated defenses and organized society conveyed a powerful message. These were not mere criminals. They were a disciplined and self-sufficient community, capable of both resisting force and engaging in reasoned diplomacy. By demonstrating control over the settlement and its surroundings, he effectively forced the Spanish to recognize that continued conflict was costly and unsustainable. Negotiations between Yanga and the colonial authorities were protracted and complex. Reflecting the high stakes involved, Yanga insisted upon terms that were unprecedented in the Americas, demanding not only freedom for all residents of San Lorenzo de los Negros, but also legal recognition of their settlement as a legitimate entity under his governance and that of his descendants. These demands were revolutionary, as they challenged the very notion of Spanish authority over people of African descent and directly confronted the entrenched systems of slavery and oppression. Yet Yanga framed his proposals in a manner that emphasized mutual benefit. The Maroons would live independently and pay tribute to the Spanish crown, ensuring that both sides could claim security and stability without resorting to continual warfare. The negotiations were not without risk. Yanga had to carefully balance firmness with tact, ensuring that his terms were taken seriously without provoking a renewed military campaign that could destroy everything he and his followers had built. Every communication, every interaction with Spanish officials, was calculated to reinforce the legitimacy of the Maroons' claims while showcasing the practical advantages of peace over conflict. Yanga's ability to combine strategic foresight with diplomacy highlights a rarely recognized aspect of leadership during this era: the capacity to achieve transformative change not only through force but through negotiation, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to justice. By 1618, Yanga's persistent efforts bore fruit. After decades of struggle, San Lorenzo de los Negros was formally recognized by Spanish authorities as a free settlement, marking one of the earliest legal acknowledgments of African autonomy in the Americas. This recognition was more than symbolic. It provided a framework of protection under colonial law, ensuring that the residents' freedom was codified and that their settlement could continue to exist without fear of immediate re-enslavement or forced displacement. For Yanga, this was the culmination of a lifelong pursuit of liberty, the realization of a vision that had begun as a desperate escape and matured into a thriving, self-sustaining community. Yanga's achievement resonated far beyond the boundaries of his settlement. He became a symbol of resistance and empowerment for people of African descent throughout the Americas, demonstrating that freedom could be claimed and preserved even under the most oppressive systems. His story challenges conventional narratives of colonial history, which often emphasize European conquest and governance while minimizing the agency of those who resisted subjugation. Yanga's success illustrates that enslaved individuals were not merely passive victims of circumstance. They were innovators, strategists, and leaders capable of reshaping the social and political landscapes of their time. The legal recognition of San Lorenzo de los Negros also set a precedent, providing a tangible example of how organized resistance coupled with strategic negotiation could result in lasting freedom. Yanga's insistence on securing rights for himself and his community was not only a personal victory but a transformative moment in the broader struggle for justice and equity in the Americas. It underscored the idea that freedom, while hard-won, was achievable through a combination of courage, intelligence, and strategic diplomacy. By the end of his life, Gaspar Yanga had secured his place in history as Mexico's first black liberator, a figure whose impact extended far beyond the boundaries of his settlement. The town he helped establish endured, its existence a living testament to his vision, leadership, and unyielding commitment to liberty. Today, San Lorenzo de los Negros, known simply as Yanga, stands not only as a geographical location but as a symbol of resilience, courage, and the profound power of human agency to challenge oppression and create lasting change. Yanga's story continues to inspire generations, reminding us that the pursuit of freedom is both a personal journey and a collective endeavor, one that requires vision, determination, and the courage to negotiate with both wisdom and strength in the face of formidable obstacles. While the story of Gaspar Yanga captures the audacity and resilience of those who fought to reclaim freedom from slavery, the narrative of Isabel de Olvera provides a complementary perspective, illustrating the courage and agency of free black women navigating a world defined by rigid social hierarchies and patriarchal control. In 16th-century Mexico, Isabel de Olvera's life unfolded at the intersection of race, gender, and colonial authority, revealing the extraordinary measures required to safeguard personal liberty and assert one's rights in a society where both could be easily threatened. As a free black woman, she occupied a precarious space. Her freedom was legally recognized yet socially vulnerable, constantly subject to the scrutiny and interference of those invested in maintaining control over women and people of African descent. Her decision to join a Spanish expedition to Santa Fe was therefore not merely a journey of travel or exploration, it was a deliberate act that tested her ability to protect her autonomy amidst uncertainty and potential danger. Isabel's journey was tied to the Guerra de Reza expedition, a mission intended to reinforce Spanish claims over the province of Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico. Traveling as a servant to a Spanish woman, Isabel was acutely aware of the risks inherent in crossing unfamiliar territories, encountering both the natural hardships of long-distance travel and the social hazards posed by soldiers, officials, and local populations who might challenge her status. Unlike many of her contemporaries, she possessed the foresight to anticipate these threats and the determination to assert her rights preemptively. Understanding that freedom could be compromised through either slavery or marriage, Isabel took the extraordinary step of drafting a formal affidavit, a legal document designed to protect her as she journeyed northward. In this affidavit, she explicitly stated her status as a free, unmarried woman of mixed African and indigenous heritage, detailing her parentage and asserting her legal autonomy. This document, witnessed by a diverse panel including a free black man, a mestiza woman, and an enslaved black woman, served not only as protection against potential interference, but also as a declaration of her understanding of personal rights and the mechanisms by which they could be defended. In doing, Isabel demonstrated a sophisticated grasp of both legal and social structures, recognizing that survival and freedom depended as much on navigation of institutional frameworks as on courage or physical endurance. Her preparation underscores the ways in which women of color in colonial Mexico actively negotiated power, leveraging knowledge of law, social norms, and networks of witnesses to safeguard their agency in spaces designed to curtail it. As Isabel traveled with the expedition, she encountered the practical challenges of life on the road. The group relied on limited supplies, including food, livestock, and essentials such as clothing and tools, all of which required careful management and organization. Yet even amidst these logistical concerns, Isabel maintained her focus on the protection of her freedom, ensuring that her rights were recognized and respected by those around her. Her steadfastness was not merely an assertion of personal dignity, but also a strategic act that influenced perceptions of black women's agency within a broader colonial context. By proactively claiming her autonomy, she subtly challenged the assumptions of the Spanish officials and soldiers who might have regarded her as subordinate or dependent, establishing a precedent for how women could assert authority within constrained circumstances. The significance of Isabel de Olvera's actions extends beyond the immediate circumstances of the expedition. Her affidavit, preserved in colonial archives, stands as one of the earliest recorded instances of a black woman formally asserting her freedom in the Americas. It offers historians and modern audiences a rare window into the lived experiences, strategies, and resilience of free women of African descent navigating a landscape dominated by European colonial interests. Her story highlights how legal literacy, strategic foresight, and moral courage could function as tools of empowerment, allowing women to negotiate spaces that were otherwise hostile to their autonomy. Moreover, it emphasizes that the pursuit of freedom in colonial contexts was multifaceted, encompassing both physical survival and the assertion of social, legal, and personal rights. Isabel's journey also illustrates the broader dynamics of intersectionality long before the term existed. She maneuvered through systems shaped by race, gender, and colonial power, carefully managing her identity and agency to maintain control over her destiny. Her insistence on formal recognition of her free status was not a passive act. It was a deliberate strategy to safeguard her future, ensuring that she could participate in society on her own terms despite the prevailing restrictions. By combining courage, foresight, and legal acumen, Isabel de Olvera created a legacy that resonates through history, reminding us that freedom is not merely inherited or granted, it is actively claimed and defended, often in ways that are both subtle and profoundly courageous. In connecting Isabel's story with that of Gaspar Yanga, a vivid tapestry emerges of black agency and resistance in the Americas, showing that the fight for autonomy and justice took many forms, from armed rebellion to legal assertion, from communal defense to personal vigilance. Isabel de Olvera's journey her affidavit, and her unwavering attention to protecting her rights serve as a testament to the courage required to navigate a world that constantly sought to limit her freedoms. Her story enriches the historical narrative, offering insight into the lived realities of women of color in colonial societies and underscoring the extraordinary lengths to which individuals went to secure and preserve their dignity, autonomy, and voice. In the complex tapestry of colonial Mexico, where social hierarchies were rigidly enforced and the freedoms of black individuals and women were routinely challenged, Isabel de Olvera emerged as an extraordinary figure whose courage and foresight transcended her time. While many of her contemporaries navigated life constrained by both race and gender, Isabel took deliberate steps to assert her autonomy, understanding that freedom was not merely a legal status but a condition that required constant vigilance and proactive defense. Her journey, which took her northward on a Spanish expedition to Santa Fe, was fraught with the usual perils of long-distance travel in the 16th century harsh landscapes, limited supplies, and the ever-present risk of encounters with those who might seek to undermine her freedom. But it was also a journey that demanded an acute awareness of social and legal dynamics, as every interaction carried potential consequences for her rights and personal security. Recognizing the precariousness of her position, Isabel crafted a legal affidavit, a document that was both a shield and a declaration, articulating clearly her status as a free woman, unmarried, and the legitimate daughter of Hernando, a black, and Magdalena, an indigenous woman. This was not a mere formality or bureaucratic exercise. It was a carefully considered act of self-assertion that placed her firmly within the legal frameworks of the Spanish colonial system while simultaneously challenging the social assumptions that often sought to deny her agency. By documenting her freedom and marital status, Isabel anticipated the scenarios in which her rights could be questioned, whether by opportunistic soldiers, local officials, or societal norms that relegated women of color to subservience. The affidavit was witnessed by a diverse group: a free black man, a mestiza woman, and a black enslaved woman whose presence validated her claim and illustrated a broader community recognition of her autonomy, emphasizing that freedom, while legally enshrined, required social acknowledgement to be effective. The substance of Isabel's affidavit highlights a sophisticated understanding of the intersections between law, social expectation, and personal agency. She meticulously asserted her legal independence, requesting a certified copy to carry with her, thereby ensuring that she could present incontrovertible evidence of her status whenever it might be contested. In doing, she navigated a system designed to limit the mobility and authority of women and black individuals, transforming potential vulnerability into an instrument of empowerment. The affidavit served not only as a safeguard against the immediate threats she might face on the expedition, but also as a symbolic act of resistance, demonstrating that a black woman could claim, document, and defend her rights in a society that systematically sought to suppress them. Isabel's actions resonate far beyond the immediate context of her journey. They provide an early example of how women of color asserted autonomy within the legal and social constraints imposed by colonial structures, prefiguring the long struggles for recognition, equality, and justice that would unfold in subsequent centuries. Her insistence on formal acknowledgement of her status underscores the idea that freedom is not simply granted or assumed. It is claimed through knowledge, courage, and the strategic use of available resources. The affidavit exemplifies how legal literacy and meticulous documentation could serve as tools of liberation, enabling individuals to navigate the oppressive frameworks of their societies while asserting their humanity and rights. The broader historical significance of Isabel de Olvera's affidavit becomes apparent when considering the pervasive limitations placed on both black communities and women in 16th century Mexico. Her statement challenges the narrative that these groups were passive recipients of oppression, revealing instead a nuanced picture of proactive resistance and self-determination. By articulating her status in precise, legally recognized terms, Isabel established a precedent that highlighted the capacity of women of African descent to negotiate power and autonomy, even in contexts where societal structures were stacked overwhelmingly against them. Her approach combined foresight, courage, and strategic thinking, demonstrating an understanding that the assertion of freedom required both formal acknowledgement and social legitimacy, a dual strategy that allowed her to protect herself while subtly reshaping perceptions of what was possible for women like her. Furthermore, Isabel's affidavit must be understood in connection with the broader tapestry of Black resistance and leadership in the Americas, complementing figures such as Gaspar Yanga, who secured the freedom of an entire community through organized resistance and negotiation. While Yanga's achievements highlight collective action and the establishment of autonomous settlements, Isabel's story illuminates the individual agency of Black women navigating colonial power structures, showing that the pursuit of freedom could take multiple forms, all of which were critical to the broader struggle for autonomy and justice. Her actions illustrate that freedom was a dynamic, ongoing process requiring vigilance, legal acumen, and moral courage, whether pursued by communities or by individuals asserting their personal rights. The enduring legacy of Isabel de Olvera lies in her ability to transform potential vulnerability into empowerment. By asserting her legal and social identity, she created a framework for safeguarding her autonomy and influencing the treatment of other women of color in her social milieu. The affidavit stands as both a historical document and a powerful symbol, reminding contemporary audiences of the ways in which legal tools, personal courage, and strategic foresight can be combined to claim justice and self-determination even within oppressive systems. Her story continues to inspire, demonstrating that the pursuit of freedom is both deeply personal and profoundly transformative, requiring intelligence, courage, and the willingness to assert one's rights against daunting odds. Isabel de Olvera's life exemplifies the resilience and ingenuity of those who fought for recognition and justice in the Americas long before modern civil rights movements, offering a vivid testament to the enduring power of agency and autonomy in the face of systemic inequality. The legacy of Isabel de Olvera extends far beyond the particulars of her journey to Santa Fe, crystallizing in her affidavit, which has endured as a remarkable historical document and a powerful symbol of foresight, courage, and the deliberate protection of personal rights within a society defined by colonial hierarchies and patriarchal constraints. In the context of 16th-century Mexico, where legal and social structures systematically marginalized both women and people of African descent, Isabel's ability to articulate her freedom and assert her autonomy represents a rare and extraordinary example of agency, demonstrating that even within oppressive systems, individuals could wield strategy, knowledge, and courage to safeguard themselves and lay claim to their rights. Her affidavit was far more than a formal declaration. It was a preemptive act of empowerment, meticulously crafted to anticipate the threats she might encounter as she traveled with a Spanish expedition. Isabel recognized that freedom was fragile and contingent, vulnerable not only to legal reinterpretation, but also to the caprices of those around her: soldiers, officials, and fellow travelers who might question her status or challenge her authority. By documenting her status as a free, unmarried woman of legitimate birth, Isabel ensured that her identity and rights could not easily be dismissed or undermined, transforming a potentially precarious existence into one firmly grounded in law and social acknowledgement. This legal maneuvering reflects a sophisticated understanding of how institutional frameworks functioned, as well as an ability to manipulate those frameworks to protect and assert personal sovereignty. Beyond its immediate protective function, Isabel's affidavit also carried profound symbolic weight, signaling a challenge to entrenched power structures and social expectations. In an era when the voices and choices of black women were routinely silenced or ignored, the act of formally asserting one's freedom, legitimacy, and legal authority was itself revolutionary. Her declaration was not simply a personal safeguard, it was a subtle, yet potent, statement that black women possessed the intelligence, foresight, and moral courage to claim agency in a society designed to deny it. The fact that her affidavit has been preserved in both Mexican and American archives further underscores its historical importance, allowing contemporary audiences to witness the deliberate, courageous acts of assertion that shaped the lived experiences of women and black communities in colonial contexts. Isabel's story also illustrates the intersectional nature of oppression and resistance, highlighting how race, gender, and colonial hierarchies intersected to create complex challenges that demanded equally nuanced responses. While her contemporaries often navigated these challenges through submission, negotiation within constrained roles, or reliance on intermediaries, Isabel took a proactive stance, employing the legal tools available to assert a level of autonomy that was exceptional for her time. By understanding the mechanisms through which her rights could be contested, and by preemptively documenting her claims, she not only protected herself, but also set a precedent for how women of African descent could navigate the overlapping pressures of racial and gendered subjugation. The courage embedded in Isabel's affidavit is inseparable from her foresight and strategic thinking. She recognized that asserting freedom required more than verbal declarations or reliance on social acknowledgement. It required formal, tangible proof that could withstand scrutiny and potential legal challenge. In doing, she transformed a deeply personal concern, the protection of her liberty, into a concrete document with the force of law, demonstrating that agency could be both performed and codified. Her action exemplifies a profound understanding of the relationship between individual initiative and structural power, showing that meaningful autonomy was possible even within rigid systems, provided one could skillfully engage with the levers of authority and anticipate the threats posed by those who might seek to undermine it. Moreover, Isabel's affidavit stands as a testament to the enduring importance of legal documentation in the broader struggle for justice and rights. It exemplifies how written records could serve as both protective instruments and historical markers, preserving the voices, intentions, and agency of individuals who might otherwise have been erased from the historical narrative. By asserting her freedom and status in a formal, legally recognized manner, Isabel not only safeguarded her personal rights but also created a lasting record of resistance, a tangible artifact that conveys her intelligence, courage, and commitment to autonomy across centuries. The preservation of her affidavit allows us to contextualize Isabel de Olvera alongside figures like Gaspar Yanga, drawing a continuum of black resistance, leadership, and agency in the Americas. While Yanga's legacy is rooted in collective action and the establishment of autonomous communities, Isabel's story underscores the vital role of individual initiative and legal acumen in challenging oppressive systems. Both narratives highlight the diverse strategies employed by people of African descent to secure freedom, asserting autonomy through armed resistance, negotiation, and legal assertion alike, and demonstrating that the pursuit of liberty was multifaceted. Combining bravery, intellect, and careful planning. Ultimately, Isabel de Olvera's affidavit is more than a historical document. It is a symbol of the enduring power of foresight, courage, and deliberate action in the defense of personal rights. It teaches that autonomy and agency are not simply granted but must be actively claimed, carefully articulated, and courageously defended, even in the face of systemic oppression. The story of Isabel reminds us that history is shaped not only by collective movements and large-scale revolts but also by the calculated, courageous actions of individuals who understand their rights anticipate threats, and assert their freedom with clarity and conviction. Her legacy resonates today, offering inspiration and insight into the ongoing struggle for justice, equality, and recognition, and serving as a timeless example of how intelligence, courage, and legal awareness can converge to protect and advance human dignity. While the stories of Gaspar Yanga and Isabel de Olvera illuminate the struggle for freedom and autonomy within colonial Mexico, the journey of Estevanico, also known as Esteban the Moor, offers a compelling perspective on the resilience, adaptability, and courage of Africans navigating the uncharted landscapes of the Americas. Born in Morocco in 1500, Estevanico's early life was shaped by the socio-political turbulence of the Maghreb, and like many of his contemporaries, he became a victim of enslavement at a young age, sold into the transatlantic networks that connected Europe, Africa, and the emerging colonies of the New World. This forced relocation was the beginning of a life defined by both extraordinary hardship and remarkable ingenuity, as he transitioned from captive to explorer, healer, and guide, leaving an indelible mark on the history of North America. Estevanico's introduction to the Americas came through Spanish expeditions led by ambitious colonial officials, particularly Panfilo de Narvaez's 1528 mission to Florida, which sought to establish new settlements along the Gulf Coast. Though initially a slave, Estevanico's linguistic skills, intelligence, and ability to adapt to unfamiliar environments allowed him to assume a role that transcended the typical expectations of enslaved individuals. He was baptized and given the Christian name Estevan, reflecting both the cultural imposition of the Spanish colonial system and his strategic accommodation within it, which allowed him access to roles and responsibilities unavailable to unconverted Africans. His position within the expedition required not only endurance and loyalty, but also initiative, as the group confronted treacherous seas, hostile terrain, and complex negotiations with indigenous populations whose lands they traversed. The expedition faced a series of catastrophic setbacks, including storms that separated ships and left many stranded along the coast, and violent confrontations with indigenous communities, reducing the survivors to a handful of individuals. Estevanico, alongside Andrés Dantes de Carranza, Alonso del Castillo Maldonado, Oliver Yezquez de Vega, became enslaved temporarily by the Quiver and Cohiltican peoples, navigating captivity with careful diplomacy and survival skills. These experiences shaped Estevanico into an expert mediator, healer, and cultural interpreter, as he learned to communicate across languages and customs, bridging the worlds of the indigenous peoples and the European settlers. The adaptive strategies he employed during these years reveal a profound understanding of human behavior, negotiation, and the necessity of flexibility in extreme circumstances. Emerging from captivity, Estevanico and his companions embarked on a remarkable overland journey spanning thousands of miles through the present-day American Southwest and northern Mexico, often serving as intermediaries between the Spanish and the indigenous communities. Estevanico, in particular, became renowned for his role as a medicine man, using traditional knowledge to heal, guide, and earn the trust of diverse groups. This role was not merely symbolic. It granted him influence, mobility, and protection, positioning him as a vital figure in the survival and eventual success of the expedition. His deep understanding of terrain, climate, and indigenous social systems allowed him to navigate complex landscapes and serve as a reliable scout and emissary, making him indispensable to the Europeans while simultaneously asserting a degree of agency unusual for someone who began the journey as a captive. Estevanico's prominence in these expeditions reflects an extraordinary intersection of survival, intelligence, and charisma, as he moved between cultures and used his skills to carve out a position of respect and authority. He became the first African known to explore significant portions of North America, venturing into territories previously undocumented by Europeans. His travels through modern-day Florida, Texas, New Mexico, and northern Mexico illustrate both the geographical scope of his achievements and the challenges of mapping unknown lands, negotiating with multiple indigenous nations, and maintaining cohesion within a fragile, multi-ethnic party of survivors. His contributions were later documented by Cabeza de Vaca in La Relación, highlighting Estevanico as a leader and guide whose knowledge and bravery were critical to the survival of the group. Estevanico's role as a guide and mediator culminated in the 1539 expedition, led by Fray Marcos de Neza into the southwest, where he advanced ahead of the main party to scout potential settlements and communicate findings using agreed-upon signals. His interactions with the Zuni and other indigenous groups, while ultimately ending tragically in his death under disputed circumstances, underscore the profound risks he faced and the cultural misunderstandings that could arise despite his expertise. Some accounts suggest he was perceived as a threatening figure, perhaps due to his display of ritual objects or the acquisition of valuable resources, while others speculate that his death reflected tensions over leadership and recognition within indigenous communities. Regardless of the precise cause, Estevanico's death marked the loss of a pioneering figure whose contributions had already reshaped European understanding of the Southwest and the indigenous peoples inhabiting it. The broader significance of Estevanico's journey lies in his embodiment of adaptability, courage, and cross-cultural mediation at a time when Africans were systematically marginalized and enslaved in the Americas. Unlike Gaspar Yanga, whose resistance focused on collective action and the establishment of autonomous communities, or Isabel de Olvera, whose assertion of legal rights exemplified strategic self-advocacy, Estevanico's achievements demonstrate the power of mobility, diplomacy, and knowledge as tools of survival and influence. He transformed the limitations imposed by enslavement into opportunities to assert agency, navigate unfamiliar terrains, and negotiate with a variety of actors, leaving a legacy that reshaped the historical record and expanded the understanding of African contributions to early North American exploration. In connecting Estevanico's story with those of Yanga and Olvera, a broader narrative emerges of Black resilience and innovation across the Americas. Each figure navigated distinct challenges: armed rebellion, legal assertion, and exploration, but all demonstrated extraordinary courage and foresight, asserting their autonomy within systems designed to suppress them. Estevanico's life reminds us that the African presence in the early Americas was far from passive. It was dynamic, inventive, and instrumental in shaping the course of history, offering a powerful testament to the versatility, intelligence, and perseverance of individuals confronting systemic adversity while leaving enduring legacies across multiple spheres of colonial life. Estevanico's extraordinary journey across the early landscapes of North America stands as a testament to resilience, intellect, and the nuanced exercise of agency under circumstances that would have overwhelmed even the most resourceful individuals. Born in Morocco in 1500 and sold into enslavement at a young age, Estevanico entered the Americas under the weight of captivity. Yet what might have been a story defined solely by suffering transformed into a narrative of remarkable achievement, navigation, and intercultural exchange. His survival depended not only on physical endurance but also on an acute understanding of the social, cultural, and environmental terrains he traversed, allowing him to operate as a healer, guide, and intermediary between European explorers and the myriad indigenous communities who inhabited vast, unfamiliar lands. From the outset, Estevanico's role in the Spanish expeditions was dictated by the structural hierarchies of colonial society, which sought to subjugate Africans and indigenous peoples alike. Yet, his linguistic skills, intelligence, and adaptability allowed him to transcend the limitations imposed by his enslaved status. Baptized as Estevan in accordance with Spanish colonial norms, he navigated the complex interplay of cultural assimilation and personal strategy, understanding that compliance with certain imposed structures could create opportunities for autonomy and influence. When the Navy's expedition to Florida met disaster storms splitting the fleet, violent confrontations with native groups, and treacherous, uncharted terrain reducing the surviving members to a handful, Estevanico's resourcefulness became indispensable. He and a small group of survivors were taken captive by local indigenous communities. Yet rather than remaining passive, he transformed these experiences into avenues for negotiation, learning local languages, understanding customs, and gaining trust. Emerging from captivity, Estevanico assumed a role that defied conventional expectations for an enslaved African. He became a recognized medicine man, healer, and guide, essential to the survival and progress of his companions and later of broader exploratory missions. His knowledge of herbs, remedies, and spiritual practices allowed him to establish credibility and influence among indigenous populations, forging alliances that were crucial for movement through vast and often hostile territories. In this capacity, Estevanico bridged cultural divides, translating not only language but also intentions, motivations, and social norms between European colonists and indigenous groups, mitigating conflict and fostering collaboration in a context fraught with uncertainty. The sheer geographical scope of Estevanico's travels is staggering. From the coast of Florida, through Texas, the deserts of the Southwest, and into northern Mexico, he traversed thousands of miles on foot, navigating rivers, mountains, and deserts that were largely unknown to Europeans. These journeys required precise observation, keen memory, and constant adaptation to environmental challenges, including unpredictable weather, scarce resources, and the navigation of territories inhabited by groups with complex social structures and defensive strategies. Estevanico's ability to survive and thrive in these conditions highlights both his resilience and his strategic thinking, demonstrating that the contribution of Africans to early exploration in North America was not peripheral but central to the practical success and survival of European expeditions. Estevanico's interactions with indigenous communities were particularly consequential, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of negotiation, diplomacy, and cultural intelligence. By presenting himself as a healer and guide, he secured the trust of groups who might otherwise have viewed Europeans solely as invaders. Gaining protection, food, and safe passage, his ability to mediate, anticipate misunderstandings, and communicate effectively allowed the expedition to proceed where others might have failed, making him an essential linchpin in the survival of the party and in the accumulation of knowledge about the lands, peoples, flora, and fauna of the American Southwest. Cabeza de Vaca's La Relation, which chronicles these events, underscores Estevanico's leadership, portraying him not merely as a subordinate, but as a key strategist whose intelligence and foresight shaped the outcomes of the expedition. Despite his immense contributions, Estevanico's life remained perilous. During later scouting missions, particularly the 1539 expedition led by Fray Marcos de Niza into Zuni territory, Estevanico confronted the limits of diplomacy, facing fatal resistance from communities that misinterpreted his authority. Intentions, or symbolic actions. Some accounts suggest his display of ritual objects or engagement in practices associated with medicine men provoked fatal misunderstanding, while others posit disputes over resources or social hierarchies. Regardless of the exact circumstances, his death underscored both the dangers inherent in frontier exploration and the extraordinary courage required to venture into uncharted territories while mediating complex cultural interactions. What Estevanico's story ultimately illuminates is the intersection of survival, knowledge, and agency in early colonial contexts. Unlike Gaspar Yanga, whose resistance and leadership resulted in the establishment of autonomous communities, or Isabel de Olvera, whose strategic legal action asserted personal rights within an oppressive system, Estevanico's influence derived from his adaptability, intellect, and mastery of cross-cultural negotiation. His life demonstrates that agency need not always manifest as armed revolt or formal legal assertion. It can also be expressed through mobility, diplomacy, and knowledge, harnessed to navigate and influence systems in which one is initially marginalized. Estevanico's legacy reshapes our understanding of African contributions to the Americas, showing that Africans were not passive actors in the colonial story, but active participants who shaped exploration, survival, and intercultural exchange. His travels provided critical knowledge about the interior of North America, its peoples, and ecosystems, informing subsequent expeditions and colonial strategies. By acting as a mediator, healer, and guide, Estevanico preserved the lives of his companions, gained respect among indigenous groups, and left an enduring imprint on the historical record. By integrating Estevanico's story with the narratives of Yanga and Olvera, we see a multifaceted portrait of African agency in the Americas. Collective resistance, individual legal assertion, and intercultural mediation. Together, these stories convey the breadth of strategies employed by Black individuals to assert freedom, influence outcomes, and contribute meaningfully to the shaping of early American history. Estevanico's journey reminds us that survival, ingenuity, and courage often manifest in diverse forms, and that African presence in early exploration was dynamic, instrumental, and transformative, leaving a legacy of resilience, intelligence, and profound impact across the continent. As we reflect on the lives of Gaspar Yanga, Isabel de Olvera, and Estevanico, a clear and compelling narrative emerges, one that challenges conventional, Eurocentric interpretations of history and illuminates the profound influence of Africans and people of African descent in shaping the early Americas. These remarkable individuals, operating in different contexts and facing unique obstacles, collectively demonstrate that African agency was not limited to labor or subjugation but extended to leadership, legal assertion, exploration, and cultural mediation, leaving indelible marks on the societies and landscapes they inhabited. Their stories provide a vital corrective to the dominant narratives that often sideline or erase the contributions of Black people, reminding us that history is far richer and more intricate than the simplified accounts typically taught in schools. Gaspar Yanga's audacious rebellion and the establishment of San Lorenzo de los Negros reveal the transformative power of organized resistance. In the face of systemic oppression, Yanga and his followers created a thriving, self-governing community, asserting not only freedom from slavery but also the right to self-determination. Spiritual leadership and economic agency. His success forced Spanish authorities to negotiate, ultimately securing legal recognition for the settlement and establishing Yanga as Mexico's first Black liberator. This episode underscores the capacity of enslaved Africans to challenge colonial power structures effectively, illustrating that agency, courage, and strategy could reshape entire communities and influence colonial policies. Meanwhile, Isabel de Olvera's journey offers a different yet equally compelling lens into the early African experience in the Americas. A free Black woman navigating the complexities of colonial society, she undertook a Spanish expedition to Santa Fe, aware of the constant threats to her liberty and bodily autonomy. Through her carefully constructed legal affidavit asserting her free, unmarried, and legitimate status, Isabel proactively protected her rights, demonstrating foresight, courage, and a nuanced understanding of the legal and social frameworks that governed her world. Her actions are emblematic of how Black women, often doubly marginalized by race and gender, exercised agency to assert autonomy and demand recognition within oppressive systems, leaving a legacy that resonates across centuries and continues to inspire advocates for equality and justice today. Estevanico, on the other hand, exemplifies the remarkable adaptability and resilience of Africans in the context of early exploration. From his beginnings as a young enslaved man in Morocco to becoming a critical figure in Spanish expeditions across Florida, Texas, New Mexico, and northern Mexico, Estevanico's life illuminates the intersection of survival, intelligence, and intercultural mediation. As a healer and guide, he navigated diverse indigenous communities, facilitated critical communication between cultures, and contributed essential knowledge about the geography, people, and resources of the American Southwest. His story challenges conventional narratives of exploration that privilege European adventurers, highlighting instead the indispensable role of Africans in mapping, interpreting, and mediating the early New World. Taken together, the stories of Yanga, Olvera, and Estevanico compel us to reconsider the broader patterns of African presence and influence in the Americas. They illustrate that African contributions were multidimensional, ranging from organized resistance and community building to legal advocacy and intercultural exploration. These individuals not only survived extraordinary challenges but also shaped the societies, policies, and knowledge systems around them, demonstrating agency, leadership, and vision in contexts designed to suppress them. By centering their narratives, we gain a more complete understanding of history, one that recognizes the complex interplay of race, culture, and power and acknowledges the profound influence of African actors in shaping the world we inhabit today. Moreover, their legacies offer critical lessons for contemporary audiences. Yanga teaches the enduring value of collective courage and strategic resistance in the face of injustice. Olvera embodies the importance of asserting one's rights and envisioning personal freedom, even within restrictive systems. And Estevanico illustrates how knowledge, adaptability, and cross-cultural negotiation can transform limitations into opportunities for agency and impact. These lessons transcend time, offering inspiration for individuals navigating challenges, striving for justice, and seeking to understand their place in an interconnected world. As we conclude this exploration of hidden Black history, it is vital to recognize that these narratives are not mere footnotes. They are central to understanding the Americas' past and its ongoing social, cultural, and political evolution. By revisiting and amplifying the stories of Gaspar Yanga, Isabel de Olvera, and Estevanico, we honor the courage, resilience, and ingenuity of individuals who defied oppression, asserted their humanity, and expanded the possibilities of freedom and knowledge for generations to come. Their legacies remind us that history is enriched when we broaden our perspective and embrace the full spectrum of human experience, acknowledging those whose contributions were long overlooked. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found these stories as inspiring and enlightening as I did, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video so we can continue uncovering hidden histories together. Your support helps bring these important narratives to light and ensures that the remarkable achievements of Black historical figures are remembered and celebrated. Sweet dreams, everyone, And may the courage and wisdom of these extraordinary individuals inspire you as you rest tonight.